Hi guys, we're just going to recap on our hatching technique, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that over here. So for the hatching, you want to make sure your lines are straight and they are moving in one direction. So for my case, I'm going to pick diagonal. So I'm going to start off rather closer together and make sure my lines are then getting spread out as I start to move across my grid, and then they spread out more and more and more and more. So I'm just keeping my hand rather steady while I do this. And then I'm going to go ahead and add more lines in between just to add more darkness, but I'm also increasing my layers as I'm doing that. So you can go over those lines, it's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and create a little bit more of a smoother transition. Now, lots of the stuff I saw the previous week as well as this week is that there's some gaps left here, and if that happens, or even here, make sure to go over them just to fill in those gaps, just with some straight lines, and just make sure that your lines are nice and straight and consistent. Now they don't have to go all the way across, but they can just make sure they're connected. There's a line in the corner, then it gives you that illusion that it's more filled. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that and spread it out so that it looks nicely passed out. Now to increase my tone, to make sure it goes dark to then light, I'm going to go ahead and keep adding. I'm going to keep this last section nice and white. I'm going to go ahead and increase those lines just to make it really, really dark. Now see how I'm really careful with my lines? I'm making sure that they don't go outside the box, and that's going to help you with a lot of neatness, especially when you go ahead and apply this to your David Hockney piece. So I'm going to go ahead and add my wispy lines, but as I start to increase it, you start to see it get darker. I'm going to turn my paper around just because it helps me to angle it better. You're welcome to do this as well. I'm just going to increase this as I start to do this. And you can start to see a transition between dark, medium and light, and then I'm going to spread that along. And then go back in, just fill it in as much as possible, just so there's a nice, rich, dark tone happening. Remember, it's not about pressure with your pen, because it doesn't really matter, it's just dark pen. But it all does count on how close those lines are, and the further apart those lines are, the lighter it will be. The closer together those will be, you get a darker tone. So I'm just going to fill in those gaps and make sure it's nicely completed. Now, I'm happy with this so far, and you can obviously go back in and make it smoother and smoother. So you can have more lines in between, fill the gaps in. I'm going to keep this demonstration rather short so you're able to watch it and have a go yourself. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on my sphere. So keeping my lines in one direction, I'm actually going to follow this as a guide because it will help you. So make sure you keep looking at your reference as well. Start off with wispy lines. Further apart is okay. And as I do that, I'm going to start to increase just to kind of get that medium tone going. It's not dark yet. It's still medium. And as I start to layer, I'm going to go in with shorter. Look how short my lines are now building. The shorter is just to kind of add that darkness on the rim of my sphere. And I'm just going to go ahead, fill any gaps in as I do that on the edges, so it's nice and dark. And there's no gaps, and there's no white spaces. We don't want any white spaces. So I'm going to blend that together. Now if I look at my image, you can see this a lot more clearly on video as well. What I can see here is that it's dark and then it's light, and there's like this little gap here, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to go ahead and start to add some lines in between there, just so it looks nicely blended together. And if you feel like, oh no, I've gone too dark and too further in, where it's all too dark here and there's no dark, medium and line transition, feel free to kind of add more wispy lines, just to kind of add more depth to your work by having lighter tones, because you'll be able to kind of emphasize your darker tones that way. Okay, that's our hatching done, both our tonal gradient and our sphere here. So just make sure that you do go into the corners and you fill those gaps in.